So you guys, have you ever decided what would it be like to just have a baby with yourself? That's right, you heard me correctly. What is it like where you are the only source of your genetic offspring, meaning you are the source of the sperm and the egg, your genetics only? What is that like? Is that where science is going? The answer is yes, that's where we're going. Let's talk about it. So, Dr. Trisa, let me tell you, this whole topic, so we are going to talk about in vitro gametogenesis. And this may sound like a mouthful to a lot of people, but basically, let me break it down for y'all because we're going to need y'all to really pay attention to this topic because it is very interesting. So a lot of the science has started in Japan, and they've been doing gametogenesis on mice where literally you can take the genetic information in just any single cell. So traditionally, we all know that it takes an egg and a sperm to produce a human being. Well, not so much anymore. They're taking, whether it's a piece of hair or some skin cells, and producing the equivalent of a sperm and an egg to then produce the offspring. And so ideally with this process, you can, in theory, take your own genetics and make your own genetics, both the sperm and the egg. Listen, the things that y'all be doing in the laboratory and y'all want to become manifested in humankind and mankind, I got questions. And I'm a clinician. We got questions.
Yeah,
let's you too have questions.
Let's just
help us process, Dr. Trisa. Help us process.
How is that not inbreeding?
Is it? It is inbreeding, though. Really, it's now becoming an acceptable form of inbreeding, essentially.
But we've been always taught that with inbreeding comes genetic abnormalities. So how are we going to be inbreeding on purpose, knowing that it's going to cause genetic abnormality? Like, how and why?
That's a great question. That's an excellent question, right? So we've all kind of thought about the cousins that get married or the brother and sisters that get married. That's a little weird, and it's still kind of weird for me. But scientifically, the concern, to your point, is the fact that it can potentially lead to serious genetic malformations and deformities.
Yeah.
Well, this is where gene editing comes in. So we've been doing gene editing. Even now, people with in vitro have been able to remove certain diseases from their genetic offspring, from their sperm or their egg. They're able to remove unwanted genes, right? And it's to the point, like we've talked about the selection of boys versus girls in the embryos that are produced in the in vitro labs. So this is a process. Gametogenesis is a process that will require some level of gene editing. And ultimately, the criticism of this is that we are heading towards the perfect race, right? So if you, and the question is, what is the perfect race? Because you're literally saying that there is no value to the person that's born blind, or there is no value to the person that's born deaf. There is no value to the person that's born with short limbs or deformed limbs or deformed faces. Now, if you ask those human beings who are living today, I'm sure they would say that there's value to their lives. But with the progression of technology and the advancement of the reproductive endo field, we're now able to remove those deformities, remove those imperfections, and create embryos that are perfect. So what would the world be like with a perfect race if should we be removing these? Because life, we can all agree, life is more difficult when you have some form of disability, right? When you have some form of deformity, life is a little bit more difficult. We deal with the superficiality and this beauty standard that had not include a lot of us. So where are we going with this, right? Because according to if you ask certain people, the perfect race does not include my melanin skin.
Right.
So my melanin skin be viewed as a imperfection. Y'all, we got Dr. Trisa shaking her head. Because what is the perfect race? Is the perfect race?
There's no such thing as perfect race. And that's just it. Like, there is no such thing. There's going to be this idolization and this, I guess, reverence to blonde hair, blue-eyed, because this has been what culturally has been the icon of beauty. But thankfully, some things have changed a bit, and that is not as, it is still a strong theme, but it's not the only overarching theme in our community and in our world. Granted, we probably didn't have as much choice because people are going to love people are going to mix and engage with people. But now we have this choice and this desire to go back to handpicking what we do. Where's the flavor going to be in that? Where's the beauty going to be in that? When everything looks the same, we become automatons. Like,
essentially, that's where we're going. And the question is, because we can all admit, even in our cultures, we still struggle with colorism, right? We still struggle with the lack of acceptance of this kind of hair, right?
Right.
And so if we have the advancement of science that is able to remove unwanted features or unwanted diseases or unwanted characteristics, then are we going to have a bunch of lighter skinned people? Because that's still the beauty standard. So if we haven't fixed the culture and the culture's stereotypes, then will we end up scientifically creating a race that does look uniformed in the sense that they're more likely going to be light skinned? People are still preferencing the color of the eyes. People are still preferencing a certain build of the body, a thin waist, that Coca-Cola shape, and not necessarily the brick house. And so will we lean towards that? And people may not necessarily do it just because they feel that that is the beauty standard, but perhaps they may want their kids to have an easier life. And in having an easier life than they did, they may want kids that are lighter skinned. They may want kids that are 6 feet tall because I want you to play basketball. They may have kids that are built in a certain way because I need you to be in the NFL. So where are we going as a society, and how do we control the advancement of science to be able to make these choices and essentially do what we call designer baby, create a race of designer babies? How do we control that if we haven't even fixed our culture?
And that's the problem. I think we can't allow it to go that far when we can't even handle ourselves as we are. I think that would be very detrimental, and it'll be shameful. We can't handle ourselves as we are. We cannot manage and love our neighbors as we are now. We can't go designing to try to make things better. We're just going to mess it up. I
can tell you, it's way more easier to love people who are just like you. Right?
it can be, it surely can be.
But it doesn't teach you what love really is.
It doesn't. Right? It really doesn't. And it was some little comment of something that I read, and it cracked me up because someone talked about someone had taught them not to say people of color, but people of the global majority. And I was like, okay.
I may have to steal that.
That one hits, right?
I may have to steal that. I may have to steal that. I like that. I definitely like that. But is there a plus to it? Is there something to be said for taking out the gene that causes diabetes? Is there something to be said for taking out the genes that cause cancer, or taking out, like the things that we deal with that have been really impactful in people's lives. Is there something to be said for removing those genes in offsprings, or should we even touch nature at all?
That's just the thing. I feel like we're definitely not morally advanced enough to be able to do those things well. But I also think that there's overall, and I mean, yes, these things are science fiction when you look at some of these shows, but all I keep thinking about is, having everything try to be so uniform, trying to like clean up and edit these genes and just messing up, like just it being somehow a mess where there's something that they take the gene out for this, but then it's really and truly also has an effect on this, and we only find out after we've removed it and it's now extinct, or you know what I mean, like
Yes, yes.
Like we're not far along enough in the process yet to be going and trying to remove a whole bunch of things. Like we need to slow down, back it up a little bit. There's a lot of work that needs to be done between here and there before you start going and talking about, oh yeah, we're gonna do this. And I get that the scientists are very excited about having the ability to do this technology. I mean, I can imagine it's fascinating for them to think, oh my goodness, I can help the world. That is the good side of it. Now, what's going to be the bad side of it? And how are we going to be trying to, deal with that? Because unfortunately, with any of these things that have been introduced, you're having issues that come along with it. I'm sure even with in vitro fertilization, there is, yes, we have the opportunity to have, you have the opportunities for people who may have had difficulty with traditional birthing methods and things like that to be able to have children. But we still haven't even dealt with some of the issues that come along with the sperm and the egg that's remained, or the embryo. Like we haven't fixed some of these little basic things yet to be jet setting into, some Jetsons future. We're not ready for that yet. Slow your roll.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I think there is a benefit in theory for the fact that if we're not dependent on eggs that have a timeline, that it does open up take the pressure off of women to be able to have kids at any age, just simply because if we're using cells from other aspects of the body, then you're not dependent on the biological clock anymore. So there can be something to be said for using gametogenesis to basically remove that age factor, that age pressure that mostly women feel, but there's also an age factor for men as well. It's a higher age, but it does exist, and it does have complications similar to the women's age. So removing the age factor may be a benefit for gametogenesis, but to your point, why aren't we focusing on putting equal energy in evaluating why infertility is such an issue, a growing issue in the US? What is it that we're being exposed to that is making us more likely to be infertile? And the fact that we haven't really put the effort into that aspect, into making our own personal lives healthier, is concerning. But you also mentioned, like, what's the bad side of it? It's kind of to your point, it's kind of like you don't know what you don't know until you realize, oh, I didn't know that. And there are also some ethical things that may come up, right? So you can, in theory, if someone preserves cells of their body, so if for example, and I guess this can be seen as a positive also. So if you may have a loved one that may be dying from cancer,
right,
and they want to, and they know that they're in hospice, for example, and their death day is coming soon, you may want to preserve their cells, just like you would do their sperm or their eggs. And be able to reproduce later as a result of that. But let's say it's an older person, now you can really harvest those cells and then reproduce. But what about the instances where you talk about, for example, like celebrities, where often they have very special fans, we're going to call them the extra special fans that are very fanatical and may just grab onto some hair from a celebrity, right? And if I just need a little bit of hair from that person, which hair falls all the time, and I can then take that hair and harvest the cells and then produce a child with that celebrity. Now, what is that like? To me, that feels violating. I know it's not a form of sexual assault or rape, but it still feels very violating for someone to take aspects of your being and be able to reproduce with that without your consent. So there's definitely to be said for, if we're going to head in this direction, we definitely need a whole bunch of laws so that so that a lot of things like that doesn't exist. But I will say overall for me, the part that really made me jolt was the thought and the concept of a uni baby. Do I really want myself to reproduce myself only?
No.
Like, do I really want my own genetics to be the only genetics in my offspring?
How narcissistic is that?
Do you really want a uni baby?
No. No.
And I've been saying this a long time, and people think I'm joking, and I'm half joking, but I do think one of the greatest epidemic that we have is the epidemic of exactly what you said, narcissism, right? And so isn't this the epitome of narcissism? Like, the narcissists out there are excited at the thought of having a baby. They are.
They're like, take my cells, make the sperm, make the egg, make one of me exactly.
They are lining up to have themselves reproduced and cloned only with their own genetics. Narcissists are so excited right now at the thought of the use of gametogenesis for uni babies. I can tell you that for sure.
I'm sure.
But how do you feel about that thought of people potentially having uni babies?
I really do think it, like you said, there'll be, the gene editing. So it takes out maybe the potential for the genetic issues that can come up with inbreeding. Let's just call it what it is. But ew. I'm sorry. That's about as elegant and as
like, as much as I love me, but I also don't like everything about me, right? And so for me, I absolutely, and I think there's so much, and this again goes for the fact that we've also devalued each other.
Yes.
Because I think there's such a beautiful, like, I would love to reproduce with someone else, because I think that's such a beautiful expression of love for that person, right? The fact that you are willing, and so symbolically beautiful, that you're willing as an expression of love to unify your genetics to produce an offspring. And I think, the fact that we've lost that, the value behind that is what is leading our culture to put the resources into going into this direction. Because let's be real, the money and the funding that's heading and funding these types of advancements could also be finding a cure for HIV, could be finding a cure for a lot of our cancers, but clearly we're using the funding to go in this direction. And that is, like, we still don't even have an understanding about fibroids for Black women, but you're able to now create uni babies, but you can't tell me why I'm more likely to have fibroids, and you can't come up with some reasonable treatment for it besides interventions, besides surgical interventions. That is really the crux of this for me, is the fact that, we're able to do this with technology scientifically, but we have yet to even, it took us how long to even get where we are with sickle cell? It took us how long to even get where we are with HIV? And now we're having these advancements, and I definitely could see, groups of people like the sexual minorities benefiting from this type of technology, but I would love to see funding poured into very common conditions that we are dealing with. on a daily basis. The fact that Black women are more likely to be off from work or not go to school because of the symptoms of fibroids, yet you still can't answer those questions, but you're pouring funding into the futuristic science. Like, do we really need, like, there are true needs, there are true medical needs.
Right.
Need uni babies.
No, we don't need uni babies. That's not a need. Yes, you're very right about that. To your point, there are lots of needs that are being unfunded, that are being unmet, that are not even being addressed or looked at. But this caters to a certain population. And I think that is where it comes down to. It caters to a certain population. We know that for the majority of the population, and I would say locally and globally, this is not going to be an option for them. This is not going to be a thing that they can do. They're not going to be able to go and say, oh, well, I'd like to no longer have the diabetes gene. Yes and no, it's run down in the family. I'm going to take out the hypertension one. Majority of the population is not going to be able to do that. And so, and the majority of this population is not the one that has the funding to provide for this.
Exactly. So my question to you also, Dr. Trisa, is, the fact that we're heading in all these directions, the science is evolving faster than the legal system can control what scientists are doing. And I know, I can imagine scientists are like so extremely happy and excited in the laboratory at this advancement, like, oh my gosh, this is going to be so good. This is evolutionary. And it really is evolutionary. The mindset to be able to get to this point is really mind-blowing, like mind-blowing emoji, mind-blowing emoji, mind-blowing emoji. But should they be more regulated?
Absolutely. It absolutely needs to be regulated. It absolutely needs to be not just local regulation. There needs to be World Health Organization level regulation on this, because not only do we not have the laws, we don't have any of the policies that come along with it. Like we don't have any guidelines for it. And with anything like this, guidelines are going to be important as to what's allowed. I mean, at least we have, I guess, the guidelines against human cloning, right? So you get to do the sheep, but you don't get to do the humans. I'm sure there's somebody in their lab somewhere trying it. But we have the guidelines there, and these are the things that we're following. There needs to be a whole lot more in terms of what can and cannot be done, because scientists are going to push the gamut, because that's what they do. That's what they do. The policymakers and the lawyers now have to go and hop to it and get their job done, hang out with them and find out what the possibilities are, and then try to find the ways of making sure that they're doing things in an appropriate manner. And then I guess the question will be, who gets to determine what that appropriate manner is?
That right there, because I mean, do you think I can truly see that this is going to be, I mean, clearly technology has become a form of war, right? So the advancement of technology and advancements of science are being used as a form of war. And there's a huge competition among the more developed countries as to who can get to that point faster. And so I can see, how can this be, and you may be trying to figure out, how can this be used in terms of government power and civic power? Well, if I have the ability to basically build a race, I can build an army that is built, that have genetic predispositions for a certain build, for a certain level of intelligence, or certain techniques or skill set. I can essentially design a race of military elite, essentially. So we have the Navy SEALs here. These are humans that are being trained. But what would it be like if you were able to create a whole race of Navy SEALs? Right? So that can create a level of military power that it's unlike anything we've ever seen before in history. So I do think that, not only does there need to be within a particular country guidelines, but there need to be international guidelines, because unless you control that, other countries that may not necessarily be under the democratic policy and control of governing, to name a few. You can think of a few. They may not necessarily believe in the democratic process, or may not necessarily be honest.
There you go.
And we can come up with quite a few dishonest leaders around the world. It's kind of like the nuclear power. Everyone's supposed to put their nuclear power down, but everybody's kind of like, what you doing over there, right? You keep testing stuff, but you supposed to put it down. So can we trust that other countries aren't already heading in this direction, that other countries aren't trying to create a perfect race? We know certain countries would love to be able to create a perfect race because they've already tried to manipulate even fertility of women and have restricted the reproduction rights of the reproductivity of women. And so this would just be along those lines, the ability to create a race of people that are elite in intelligence or elite in artistic skills, elite in military power. That's pretty much it. This is not control. This is where we're going.
It makes me want to hold my child and bring him back into my body and just keep him there.
Girl. Let's touch on that, because I would be so, like, if this is happening in our lifetime, could you imagine what may be happening in his lifetime?
These may be literal decisions that he has to make as to if he's choosing to do this particular thing or not. Like, if he is having to choose whether or not he is going to, go in and pick out the genes for his child. Like,
yes,
this may be an actual thing for him.
That is a very real, that is a very realistic possibility. That is no longer the Jetsons. That is here. It is now. It is present. And it is
Can't we just get flying cars?
We are, by the way.
Oh.
Tested. No, for real. They are testing flying cars. They just haven't gotten all the approval that they need. That is for, I'm sorry, girl. I'm so sorry. The Jets, listen, this is one of those times where you're like, I should pay attention to the Jetsons a little bit closer. Because even though I thought the Jetsons were like, this is some creative writing.
Right.
Like, they were prophetic. The Jetsons were prophetic.
Yeah.
Who would have thought? Who would have absolutely thought? But to your point, Trisa, as a parent, for me, I feel like it's even that much more important to raise good human beings.
Yes.
With some very strong morals, because the lines are getting so blurred right now.
Yes.
So it's so important to have human beings that are being raised well.
That value life, that value differences.
Yes.
That values connection and bonding. Because I see that there could be so much disconnect happening with these things. Taking out the process of intercourse, and not to say that people will not continue to have intercourse and bond or whatever the case may be, but
they may not. They're getting robots, but that's a whole other conversation. I'm sorry, I digress.
But to take out that kind of bonding and that connection, it creates a world. Everything is just becoming so very digitalized, and you're interfacing so much with the screen and less with the people. Like, even if you decided you didn't want to be have a uni child, you can have a child, but you go and you pick your things and it becomes easier. Like right now, people can still do that if they're choosing to be solo parents, or if they're having difficulty, or same sex, whatever. There are other options of people that need help to be able to have children, but there's still a level of relationship and connectivity with it. But I just feel like it's going to become so very robotic and so very automated. It just takes the flavor out of life. Like, what's life without relationships? What's life without community, without, that's just not life. I don't know how else to explain it, but it just feels very fake, very foreign. And yeah, we may take out the predisposition for these things, but does it mean that we actually get away from them? Like if you go in and you say that there's a gene for depression, and you go in and you take out that gene for depression, but your lifestyle is as such where this is all you're engaging with, a screen, and you have no social support, you have no community. Who said that won't show up anyway? There's the expression of the gene, and we can bring that down, but then there's the way that we live.
Yeah. Oh, to your point, I mean, I would definitely, I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head that we are removing what makes us humans, the key of humanity, which is relationship, community, the ability to join together in union. Those are unique that's what makes us so different from machinery. And I can't even believe that I have to even say that.
Right. It's that relationship. And we know people, choose to have relationships with objects. That's
yes, they do.
But
yes, they do. They mail order. That's the whole, but that's kind of, it's a product of this age, right? A product of the lack of ability to be able to, one, be tolerant of our differences so that we can come together. People much rather be isolated and have relationships with a robot that has no ability to have a true relationship than to have a relationship with a human being. It is a very peculiar world that we're living in now. I don't even know where it's going, and I don't even want to think about where it's going, but I'm hoping that for those of us who really do value humanity and the beauty of humanity, that we continue to raise our voices and try to push the needle in the opposite direction. It's definitely going against the grain because the grain right now is supporting technology and the digitalized world. But I would hope that what we learned together as an entire world during the pandemic is just how valuable it is to have relationships with other people. And I don't want us to lose sight of that. So that being said, Dr. Trisa, where can they find you to find out what scientific projects you want to see being done as you advance the care for women and their pelvic floor? Or rather, let me correct myself, their pelvic diaphragm.
Hey, wait a minute. I can be found at trisajob.dpt on Instagram.
Awesome. Always great conversation with Dr. Trisa. I am Dr. T, the hand behind the handle of Healthy Bump Club right here on YouTube, and also the hand behind the handle of Healthy Bump Club on Instagram. We thank you guys for watching. Thank you for supporting us financially, either through our apparel, through our Apple Music link, and also by those who have donated to us in the past directly. We appreciate you all in whatever way you choose to support us. Also, don't forget to comment, like, and share these conversations. A lot of people don't even know that these things are happening, and it's happening right underneath our nose. And before you know, we look up and our is completely different. So make sure your family is in the know. Share this information as much as you can, and make sure you check out our other episodes. We have some really great hot conversations going on. We are on the cutting edge of topics. We don't want you to miss out. So we hope to see you guys when next episode.